I think back until about the 1970s, California and LA was considered the West, and
Right.
that's where the dreamers and drifters and hucksters and the grifters all went when they were trying to reinvent themselves or run away from their past.
You're listening to Radio Free Mike. Welcome to Radio Free Mike, the podcast about freedom and its discontents. My name is Michael Scott Moore, and today we're talking to Mark Sundeen, a writer I've known since high school when we were both slightly disaffected teenagers in a surf town in Southern California. Mark's an accomplished novelist and essayist, author of The Man Who Quit Money, a best-selling biography of Daniel Suelo, who sold all his things to live in a Utah cave. And now Mark has published a collection of similar nonfiction portraits of people who inhabit the American West, the dreamers and drifters who, as he put it, once populated Los Angeles and San Francisco before those cities got too expensive. It also turns out to be a chronicle of American masculinity in the age of Trump. Mark, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, it has been almost a week.
At least, and before that, decades.
Yeah.
So you and I went to high school together, and we graduated, cut our teeth anyway on the same school paper.
Yeah, we were La Vista staff, or La Vista.
La Vista, exactly.
I guess is what they call it now. I think back in the day we called it La Vista.
La Vista, yeah.
We didn't know any better.
No, the jury was out on that. But congratulations on the new book. And like I've said before, I think the title is terrific, Delusions and Grandeur.
Thank you.
It's a series of essays that you've been writing over some time, isn't it?
Yeah, the oldest essay in the book I wrote in 1999 while I was doing an artist residency out on the old Wendover Air Force Base, which is right on the border of Utah and Nevada. Mm-hmm. And years have passed.
Well, and Wendover is one of the sort of one of the settings. The Wendover is the site of that famous neon cowboy.
Right. Wendover Will.
Wendover Will.
Waves his hand perpetually there on the horizon.
Exactly.
By the highway.
I like him. He and there's like a West Wendover and an East Wendover. There's one in half of it's in Nevada, half of it's in Utah, and it's split a little bit like St. Louis and East St. Louis.
Yeah, the original Wendover is in Utah, and that's where the Air Force Base was, and where its shell remains. But it's completely collapsed economically. And then just over the border, of course, is where the casinos are in West Wendover. Right. And it's thriving because it has a casino industry.
That's funny. Right. And one of the essays is, well, so first of all, why you went to a writing retreat on the airport? I don't think I quite absorbed
it was a residency sponsored by the Center for Land Use Interpretation.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
They owned, I want to say a hangar, but maybe it was a mess hall. And that's where the Mexican norteño bands would come to perform and then get busted by some kind of business rival of the manager. So there was some intrigue on the base.
That's amazing. I mean, that kind of introduces the fact that these essays are about some of the petty rivalries and some of the people you meet in what's called the American West, which, as you pointed out recently, doesn't include the West Coast.
Right. I think back until about the 1970s, California and LA was considered the West, and that's where the dreamers and drifters and hucksters and the grifters all went when they were trying to reinvent themselves or run away from their past. And of course, they turned up in the Raymond Chandler novels and in the Joan Didion essays. But I think starting in about the 80s, it got too calcified and it became unaffordable, and those people couldn't sneak past. You know, they couldn't get a little room with a bathroom down the hall in Santa Monica anymore.
Right.
And been a rebound, and now we find those people bent on reinventing themselves are now in places like Tucson and Albuquerque and Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you paint these people. They're not sketches. They're mini portraits. So you paint them extremely beautifully. So in Wendover, for example, you met a couple of impersonators. So one was an Elvis impersonator, and his girlfriend, basically, or his wife, was a Madonna impersonator, as well as, I mean, they both had a roster of people that they impersonated.
Yeah, she did Shania Twain. That was one of her big ones, and Madonna. And you know, you couldn't really imagine a smaller time venue than the Wendover Casino. And yet these two really believed they were on the cusp of making it big in the music business. And I suppose I could relate to that, you know, and I was living in a trailer in Moab, Utah,
right,
trying to write my first book. I just finished what became my first book, and writing essays like this, but thinking I was a really good writer, thinking like the next step was going to be, you know, fame and fortune. Right. And so I think I could identify with these two.
Yeah. And it's really affecting. I mean, they both have, they're both songwriters too, and they want to push forward their careers as original artists. But while they're at it, they have these impersonation careers, which are actually going pretty well.
Yeah. They sometimes would perform their originals, and you know, they weren't as well received by the 15 or 20 drunk people in the crowd as their Madonna and Elvis impersonations.
Yeah. No, it's good. And then there's an essay set in Utah in a tourist attraction called the Hole in the Rock. Which I really found interesting too, because the guy who took it over. So first of all, you keep writing out the name the way it's spelled on the cliff, but I didn't realize that at first. You just kept writing it in all caps, "Hole in the Rock," with the, you know, not even apostrophes around the end, but in a quote mark on one side. And I knew you were doing it on the wrong side. On the wrong side. Should have
been before it, but
it annoyed me so much. But I knew you were doing it on purpose, so I finally looked it up so I could look at the and it's spelled that way in spray paint or something on the actual rock, on the cliff face. Hole in the rock.
10, 15-foot letters.
Incredible.
Incredible. N quotation mark.
But it's a tourist attraction, and it's been run, I think, first by one family, then by another.
Yeah, so the original visionary was a guy named Albert Christensen, who came out in the 1930s, and he was a sculptor and a painter, and he imagined he was going to do a massive sculpture on par with Mount Rushmore.
Right.
And it was going to be of Franklin Roosevelt and a little known senator named Wendell Willkie, who challenged Roosevelt. And he ended up making a small model, sort of maybe 10 or 15 feet. And that was he was then going to extrapolate that onto the many, many big cliffs around there. But somehow he got into a tussle with the Bureau of Land Management, and they denied his permit, and they actually destroyed what he had done because it was on public lands. Yeah. And he never succeeded in becoming a great artist, but he did build or blast this huge cave. He made a big hole in the rock, and he lived in there with his wife. But he died kind of right at about the time it was coming to fruition.
Wow.
And so his widow and her son inherited it and ran it as this wacky tourist trap for decades. And you could see things like his painting of Jesus and his poorly taxidermied donkey.
Right, the stuffed donkey.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's also kind of a shrine to him.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this has been a free preview of this episode. And the whole thing is open to paid subscribers to Radio Free Mike. So if you'd like to hear the rest, please hit the link in your show notes or in the body of the email we've sent you and upgrade your subscription over at Substack. Then you'll be able to listen to the full episode on any platform. Thanks for listening.